Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's Thought for the Week. And the theme for this week is forgiveness. Now, I'd like to begin by showing you an image and asking you a question. Who are the people in the image, and what on earth is going on? Now, I don't expect that most of you will be able to identify the people because the image was taken a very, very long time ago, before any of you were born. In fact, maybe even before many of the staff were born. But the image shows two individuals, Pope John Paul II and a guy called Mehmet Ali Agca. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, so forgive me. But these two guys, their lives intertwined, they crossed paths on one fateful day, Wednesday the 13th of May, 1981. The guy at the top there, Pope John Paul II, he was out and about in St. Peter's Square in his Pope-mobile. Yes, that is really what it's called, Pope-mobile. Waving at the crowds, giving his blessing, doing his Pope thing, when suddenly this guy Ali emerged from the crowd, and you can see him just about in this picture here, he's circled. And he gets out a gun and he shoots the Pope at practically point blank range. And the Pope, of course, is very, very injured indeed. You can see him in this image falling down, and his security personnel, his guards who are around him all the time, are baffled as to what's just happened. They couldn't really understand how or why somebody would want to shoot the Pope. He was rushed to hospital. He was very, very ill indeed. In fact, people didn't know whether he was going to make it. But he did. He pulled through. And the picture of him at the bottom there is in the hospital ward. And I particularly like the fact that he's wearing white still, because he's the Pope and popes wear white. Maybe that's just a coincidence, but it always makes me smile. Pope John Paul II went on to live a very long, a very happy life as Pope, but he did suffer some health consequences later on as a result of this attack. Ali, of course, was arrested and was sent to prison. And that's where we go back to our image, because the astonishing thing about these two guys is that they became lifelong friends. The Pope visited his would-be assassin. First time he went, they talked over why on earth he did it, and the Pope listened. And we don't really know details as to the why, but the Pope forgave him, and the Pope very publicly forgave him. And later on, this guy Ali was so moved by the friendship he had with Pope John Paul II that when Pope John Paul II died, as I say, of old age, effectively, he went to his funeral. And every year since, he's been to his grave and laid flowers on the anniversary of his death. And Ali himself turned his life around. There was a bit of a long story in between, but basically, he came out well. He turned well. So, the power of forgiveness is something quite extraordinary. Of course, the Pope was probably acting on the advice of the Bible. That wouldn't be a surprise. It says in the Bible 2 or 3 key things about the idea of forgiveness. The first one I'd like to share with you is this one. It says, "Bear with one another, and if a person has a complaint against another, forgive each other, as the Lord has forgiven you. So you also must forgive." It's quite clear. And then the second one is Jesus talking. He says, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." I think it's fairly difficult to do that, but I think the Pope, in the example that I've just shared with you, really did love his enemy, really prayed for him who persecuted him. And the final example of forgiveness in the Bible is the very famous story of the prodigal son, which I'm sure many of you will already know. The son wants his share of his dad's estate so that he can go off and do his own thing. And he goes off and he spends his money on lavish living and eventually runs out of money. And he has to go back to his dad with his tail between his legs and say, "Hey, look, I'm really sorry. I've spent all the cash. Perhaps you could take me back as a servant or a slave." He thinks his dad's going to be angry with him. His dad would be right to be angry with him. But, of course, the dad is just delighted to have the son back and when the son comes back and asks for forgiveness, the father throws his arms around him and says, "Hey, welcome back," and he throws him a big party. And I suppose the reason that Jesus tells the story might be that this is the way that God relates to us when we go back and we say, we're really sorry for the things that we've done wrong. Now, of course, most of us will never have to face that huge act of forgiveness that Pope John Paul II did. I hope that none of us will ever be attacked by an assassin, or that we'll ever have to face someone who has done something quite so atrocious. But we will all, no doubt, have to forgive our friends when things go wrong in our friendships, perhaps our parents when that relationship breaks down and they don't understand us, maybe our kids when we have kids in the future. We'll all have partners, no doubt, siblings, possibly the odd run-in with a teacher, or when you're older, maybe a bit of a colleague who frustrates you. So there are going to be occasions in everybody's lives where forgiveness is going to be really important. And so I thought what I'd do is just have a little look at some thoughts on forgiveness that I found online. And the first one, this one here, I really like. Forgiving others is easier when I remember that I'm human and stupid too. I think it's so true. We have to remember that actually everybody is in the same boat. We all make mistakes, and therefore forgiving others is what we'd expect someone to do for us when we make our mistakes. The second quote here, one of the hardest things to do is forgive someone that isn't sorry, is so true. That one really rings true for me. But actually that's what we're asked to do. And there are lots of good reasons why we might need to forgive someone even when they're not sorry. Perhaps psychological reasons. It's better for us. We know it's better for us to let go of those things that cause bitterness and resentment. And the final quote, we need to forgive ourselves for all the things we didn't do and all the things we should have done. You can't get stuck on the regrets of what should have happened, it says. And forgiving ourselves is a huge part of the story. I think when we forgive ourselves, it enables us to forgive others and to realise that we're all human. So ultimately, why forgive? Well, because forgiveness is about letting go of those things that hold us back from friendship, from love, from self-respect, and from respecting others. So I think forgiveness, although incredibly difficult, is really, really important. And so this week, we're asking you to reflect on and to think about the people in your life that perhaps need your forgiveness right now. It's been a long lockdown. We've been stuck in the home with people. Perhaps we've got on each other's nerves a little bit. Who do we need to forgive? And who do I need to ask to forgive me? So that's your challenge for this week. Forgive. I'm going to end with a short prayer. Lord, just as you so generously forgive me, help me also to forgive others and not keep any form of hate, anger, or revenge within my mind. Bestow the power of love upon us all, and just as I forgive, so too would everyone. Have a really lovely week, everybody.